Sarah Chen sat in the back row of the massive room. The chair was too big for her small human body, making her look even smaller than she already was. Around her, hundreds of alien creatures filled the giant space. Some were tall as trees. Others had too many arms, or eyes that glowed in the dark. A few looked like walking rocks, or moving clouds of gas. This was the Galactic Species Integration Hearing. Every alien race in the galaxy sent someone here when a new species wanted to join their big group called the Confederation. Today, it was Earth's turn. Humans wanted to join the galactic community. Sarah watched her two human companions sit at the front of the room. Ambassador Torres wore his best suit and kept fixing his tie. Dr. Voss had her tablet ready, full of pictures and data about Earth. They looked nervous, but excited. They were here to show everyone how great humans were. They wanted to prove Earth deserved a place among the stars. But Sarah was different. She wore a simple black outfit and sat very still. Her hands rested on her knees. Her breathing was slow and steady. She looked calm, almost bored. Most aliens in the room forgot she was even there. The room buzzed with strange sounds. Some aliens talked with their minds, sending thoughts to each other without speaking. Others released smells to communicate. The big ones made deep rumbling sounds that shook the floor. Sarah could feel the vibrations through her chair. Ambassador Torres stood up and began talking. His voice echoed in the huge space. He told everyone about Earth's blue oceans and green forests. He showed pictures of human cities and art. He talked about music and books and all the beautiful things humans had made. Dr. Voss joined him with charts and numbers. She explained human science and medicine. She showed how humans had learned to fly and build computers. She talked about the rockets that brought them to the stars. The alien delegates listened politely. Some seemed interested. Others looked bored. A few whispered to each other in languages Sarah could not understand. But something strange was happening that no one else noticed. The predator aliens were not watching Torres or Voss. They were watching Sarah. In the front section sat the Vorthak. They looked like giant wolves that walked on two legs. Their pack leader had scars on his face and yellow eyes that never stopped moving. He was supposed to be listening to the presentation about human art, but his eyes kept moving to the back row where Sarah sat. Behind them were the Shard Queens. They looked like living crystals, tall and sharp and beautiful. Light moved through their bodies like water. They could sense fear and pain from far away. But today, one of them kept turning her crystalline head toward the quiet human in the back. The biggest aliens in the room were the Devourers. They were so large they needed special seats made of metal. Their species ate entire planets when they were hungry. They had sensors that could detect the heartbeat of a mouse from miles away. Today, their massive heads were pointed not at the humans giving the presentation, but at the small woman sitting alone. Sarah felt their attention on her like heat from a fire, but she did not turn to look at them. She did not change her breathing or move her hands. She just kept watching the presentation like she was interested in every word. But she was doing something else too. Sarah was counting. She counted the exits. There were 12 doors around the room. 7 were big enough for the largest aliens to use. 5 were smaller, meant for species like humans. She memorized which ones were closest to her position. She counted weapons. The security guards carried energy staffs that could stun or kill. Some aliens wore ceremonial items that looked harmless, but could probably hurt someone. The podium where her colleague stood was made of heavy metal. It could be used as a shield or a weapon if needed. She counted threats. Not all the aliens in this room were friendly. Some belonged to groups that did not want humans in the Confederation. They thought humans were too weak or too young as a species. A few looked at Torres and Voss like they were looking at food. Sarah had been a soldier before she became a diplomat. Old habits were hard to break. Even in a peaceful place like this, Her mind automatically looked for danger. She planned escape routes and defensive positions without even thinking about it. The presentation continued. Torres talked about human kindness and how much humans wanted peace. Voss showed pictures of human children playing together, no matter what color their skin was. They painted humans as gentle creatures who only wanted to make friends among the stars. Some aliens seemed touched by this. A few made sounds that might have been approval. But the predator species remained focused on Sarah. Their hunting instincts were telling them something, but they could not understand what. The Vorthak pack leader tilted his head like a confused dog. His species had conquered 3 sectors of space by being the best hunters in the galaxy. They could smell weakness and fear better than anyone. But the human female in the back row smelled like neither prey nor predator. She smelled like something else entirely. The Shard Queen's light flickered in patterns that showed confusion. Her species fed on the terror of their victims. They could sense the exact moment when prey gave up hope. But this human gave off no fear at all. Instead, there was something that reminded the queen of the moment right before she struck a killing blow. But that made no sense. This human was not hunting anyone. The Devourer's massive brain processed thousands of data points every second. Heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, chemical signals. Every living thing in the room registered as either predator or prey in their vast mind. But the human in the back row registered as something their sensors had never encountered before. Sarah knew they were watching her. She could feel their confusion like a physical thing in the air. But she did not react. She just sat in her chair, hands folded, watching her colleagues try to convince the galaxy that humans deserved a chance. The first part of the hearing ended with polite applause. Torres and Voss looked pleased with themselves. They had done a good job, showing Earth's best side. Now, there would be a break before the questions began. As the aliens began to move around and talk to each other, Sarah remained in her seat. She was exactly where she wanted to be, in the back, in the shadows, watching everything. But every predator in the room was watching her back. The break began, and aliens started moving around the huge room. Some went to get food from tables set up along the walls. Others gathered in small groups to talk about what they had heard. The air filled with even more strange sounds and smells as hundreds of different species mixed together. Sarah stayed in her seat. She opened a small bottle of water and took a sip. Her movements were slow and careful, like she had all the time in the world. She looked relaxed, but her eyes never stopped moving. She watched every alien in the room without seeming to stare at any of them. Ambassador Torres and Dr. Voss were surrounded by friendly aliens asking questions about Earth. They looked happy and excited to answer. Sarah smiled a little as she watched them. They were good people doing important work. But other things were happening too. Huntmaster Zektar stood up from his seat in the front row. He was the leader of the Vorthak pack, the most feared hunters in 3 sectors of space. His species looked like giant wolves, but they were smarter and more dangerous than any Earth animal. They hunted in groups and never gave up once they picked a target. Zektar had been a pack leader for 30 years. He had hunted creatures on 1,000 different worlds. He could smell fear from miles away. He knew the difference between predator and prey just by looking at them. His instincts had never been wrong. But today, his instincts were giving him 2 different messages at the same time. He looked at the small human female in the back row. Everything about her screamed prey to his wolf-like mind. She was small and soft. She had no claws or fangs. Her species was young and weak compared to most aliens in the room. She should have been easy to read. But something else was sending a completely different signal. Something deep in his hunter's brain was warning him about her. It was the same feeling he got when he faced another apex predator on a hunt. The feeling that said, Be very, very careful. Zektar found himself walking toward the back row. He told himself he was just being curious. Maybe he could learn something about this new species by talking to one of them. The two at the front were busy, but the female in the back seemed available. As he got closer, the feeling got stronger. His pack senses were screaming warnings, but he could not understand why. She was not doing anything threatening. She was just sitting there, drinking water. "Greetings," he said, in the common galactic language. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "I am Huntmaster Zektar, of the Vorthak First Pack." Sarah looked up at him calmly. He was huge, at least 8 feet tall, with muscles like steel cables under his fur. His yellow eyes were the color of lightning, and just as dangerous. Most creatures would have been terrified to have him standing so close. "Hello," Sarah said in a quiet voice. "I'm Sarah Chen. Nice to meet you." That was it. No fear, no excitement, no reaction at all. She looked at him the same way she might look at a friend who had just walked up to say hello. Zektar felt his confusion grow stronger. "Your species seeks to join the Confederation," he said, trying to understand her better. "Yes," Sarah nodded. "We hope we can contribute something useful." "What can your kind contribute?" Zektar asked. "You seem small." Sarah smiled, and for just a moment, Zektar felt something that made his fur stand up. It was not a mean smile or a threatening one, but there was something behind it that his predator instincts recognized. "We're good at solving problems," Sarah said simply. Before Zektar could ask more questions, another alien approached. This one was even more impressive than the Vorthak. Shard Queen Velithara moved like flowing light, her crystalline body catching and reflecting the room's illumination. She was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The Shard Queens were psychic hunters. They could sense emotions and use them as weapons. Fear, pain, despair. These were tools they used to break their prey's mind before they attacked the body. They were some of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Velithara had been watching the human female for the entire first part of the hearing. Like Zektar, she could not understand what she was sensing. "Huntmaster," Velithara said to Zektar, in a voice like singing crystal. "You seem disturbed." "The human puzzles me," Zektar admitted. He was not afraid to show confusion to another apex predator. They understood each other. Velithara turned her attention to Sarah. The queen's psychic senses reached out, trying to read the human's emotional state. What she found made her crystalline form flicker with uncertainty. Most creatures' minds were like open books to her. Fear, anger, joy, sadness, all emotions had colors and textures she could see and touch. But Sarah's mind was different. It was not empty or blocked. It was still, like a deep, calm lake with something powerful swimming far beneath the surface. "Human," Velithara said, her voice carrying harmonics that could break minds if she wanted them to. "Do you know what I am?" "A Shard Queen," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Your species uses psychic energy to hunt. You're very beautiful, by the way." The compliment was so simple and honest that Velithara found herself almost laughing. When had anyone ever called her beautiful instead of terrifying? "You show no fear," the queen observed. "Should I be afraid?" Sarah asked, tilting her head slightly. It was such an innocent question, but something about the way she asked it made both predators take a small step back. There was no challenge in her voice, no threat. But there was also no submission. She asked the question like someone who genuinely wanted to know the answer, not because she was worried about the consequences. A shadow fell over them as something even larger approached. The devourer called itself, "Consume all things that grow." It was 15 feet tall, and looked like a moving mountain of dark metal and organic parts. Its species had eaten entire solar systems when they were very hungry. They were the ultimate apex predators in the galaxy. The Devourer's massive head turned towards Sarah. Sensors all over its body were taking measurements, analyzing her chemical signature, reading her vital signs. Its quantum-enhanced brain processed the data at incredible speeds. What it found made no sense. "Small flesh thing," the Devourer said in a voice like an earthquake. "You register as both prey and non-prey simultaneously. Explain this impossibility." Sarah looked up at the massive alien without flinching. Most creatures would have fainted just from being in its presence. The Devourer could kill her with one finger, and they all knew it. "I'm not sure I understand the question," Sarah said politely. "Could you be more specific?" The three apex predators looked at each other. They were some of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, feared across thousands of worlds. But this small human was treating them like normal people she had just met at a party. Zektar's pack instincts were howling warnings. Velithara's psychic senses showed readings she had never seen before. The Devourer's quantum brain was processing impossible data. All three of them felt the same thing. They were in the presence of something that did not fit into any category they understood. Sarah was not prey. Prey did not act like this. But she was not a predator either, at least not any kind they recognized. "It has been interesting speaking with you," Velithara said finally. "Likewise," Sarah smiled again. "I hope we get a chance to talk more later." The three apex predators moved away, but they did not go far. They found seats where they could still see Sarah clearly. Other predator species in the room noticed this and started paying attention too. If the most dangerous hunters in the galaxy were interested in the small human, there must be a reason. Sarah finished her water and closed the bottle. She checked the time on her watch, an old mechanical one that looked like it had seen many years of use. The break would end soon, and the real questioning would begin. She was ready for whatever came next. She had been ready for a long time. But around the room, every predator species was trying to solve the same puzzle. What exactly was Sarah Chen? The answer would come soon enough. The break ended, and everyone returned to their seats. Ambassador Torres and Dr. Voss looked confident as they walked back to the front of the room. Several alien delegates had spoken to them during the break, asking good questions about Earth and humans. Things seemed to be going well. Sarah noticed that more aliens were watching her now. Word had spread about her conversation with the apex predators. Creatures throughout the room kept glancing at her, trying to figure out what made her so interesting to the galaxy's most dangerous hunters. She did not mind the attention. She had been watched by dangerous things before. The second part of the hearing began with questions from the delegates. Most were simple and friendly. What kind of government did humans have? How many people lived on Earth? What did humans eat? Torres and Voss answered everything with patience and good humor. But then something changed. A group of aliens stood up in the middle section of the room. They were different species, but they all wore the same symbol, a red circle with a line through it. Sarah recognized the symbol. These were members of the Hegemony, a group that believed only the strongest species deserved to be in the Confederation. The Hegemony's spokesperson was a creature that looked like a giant insect, with too many legs and eyes that glowed red in the dark. It clicked and buzzed when it spoke. "We object to this admission," the creature said. Its voice was harsh and unpleasant. "Humans are too weak to join the Confederation. They have no natural weapons, no psychic powers, no great size or strength. They are prey animals trying to pretend they belong among predators." Murmurs went around the room. Some delegates seemed to agree. Others looked uncomfortable. The Hegemony had done this before to other species trying to join. Ambassador Torres stepped forward. "With respect, we believe humans have many strengths that do not involve physical power. Our intelligence, our creativity, Our ability to work together? Words, the hegemony leader interrupted. Weak species always use words when they have no real strength. We propose a demonstration. Sarah felt something cold move down her spine. She had heard about hegemony demonstrations before. They did not end well for the species being tested. What kind of demonstration? Dr. Voss asked, though she looked like she already knew she would not like the answer. The insect creature's eyes glowed brighter. A simple test of defensive capabilities. We will release hunting constructs into this chamber. If humans can defend themselves, perhaps they deserve consideration. The creature did not finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Hunting constructs were artificial creatures designed by the hegemony for exactly this purpose. They were fast, smart, and deadly. The hegemony had used them to eliminate dozens of lesser species delegations over the years. They always claimed it was just a test, but the constructs were programmed to kill. This is outrageous, Torres protested. This is supposed to be a peaceful hearing. The galaxy is not peaceful, the hegemony leader said. If humans cannot defend themselves here, how can they defend themselves among the stars? The constructs are already being released. Panels in the floor slid open with a hissing sound. Dark shapes began climbing out, creatures that looked like they had been made from nightmares and metal. They moved wrong, too fast and too fluid, like liquid death given form. There were 6 of them, each one designed to kill in a different way. They had been programmed to target the human delegates specifically. Their sensors locked onto Torres and Voss immediately. Panic filled the room. Delegates began screaming and running for the exits. The smaller species trampled each other trying to get away. Even some of the larger aliens moved back from the constructs with obvious fear. The chamber's security forces tried to respond, but the constructs were designed to counter standard Confederation weapons and tactics. Energy beams passed through them without effect. Stun fields did nothing. Physical barriers crumbled like paper. 2 constructs moved toward Torres with deadly grace. He backed away, trying to reach for an emergency communicator, but he was too slow. The things would reach him in seconds. Another construct flowed toward Dr. Voss like living shadow. She had nowhere to run. Her back was against the podium. That was when Sarah moved. She did not run toward the exits like everyone else. She did not freeze in terror like prey animals do when faced with predators. Instead, she stood up calmly and walked toward the danger. Her movement was different from anything the watching aliens had ever seen. She did not hurry, but she covered ground fast. She did not look panicked, but she was completely focused. She moved like water flowing downhill, inevitable and unstoppable. Sarah reached the podium first. Her hand closed around a ceremonial staff that had been part of the room's decoration. It was made of heavy metal and felt good in her grip. In her hands it stopped being decoration and became a weapon. The construct attacking Dr. Voss never saw her coming. Sarah struck from the side, using the staff like a spear. The point went through the construct's central processor with surgical precision. The creature collapsed instantly, its systems dying with an electronic whine. Dr. Voss stared in shock. "Sarah, how did you—" "Move to the back wall," Sarah said without looking at her. Her voice was calm, but there was steel in it now. "Stay low and keep the podium between you and them." Sarah spun as another construct tried to attack her from behind. The staff whistled through the air and connected with the creature's head, crushing the sensor cluster there. The construct stumbled, blind and confused. But Sarah was not done with it. She followed up with 3 more strikes, each one precise and deadly. The construct fell apart, like a broken machine. 2 more constructs abandoned their original targets and focused on Sarah. They had been programmed to prioritize the greatest threats, and their sensors now identified her as exactly that. They attacked together, moving faster than most eyes could follow. But Sarah was not where they expected her to be. She had read their approach patterns and moved accordingly. The constructs struck empty air while she struck them from their blind spots. The room had gone silent, except for the sound of metal hitting metal and the electronic screams of dying machines. Everyone who had not fled was watching in amazement as the small human woman systematically destroyed creatures designed to be unstoppable. Sarah did not fight like the aliens expected. She did not roar or snarl like a predator. She did not use brute force or overwhelming power. Instead, she fought like something that had never known what it meant to be helpless. Every move she made was efficient and calculated. She used the room's architecture against the constructs, forcing them to attack from disadvantageous positions. She turned their own momentum against them. She found weak points in their design and exploited them with ruthless precision. The fifth construct tried to use its camouflage systems to become invisible. Sarah did not even pause. She struck at empty air and somehow connected with the hidden creature. It materialized as it fell, its stealth systems damaged beyond repair. The last construct was the largest and most dangerous. It had been watching the fight, learning from Sarah's tactics. Now it attacked with everything it had, claws that could cut through steel, energy weapons built into its arms, armor that could stop most attacks. Sarah faced it without fear. She broke the ceremonial staff over her knee, giving herself 2 shorter weapons. The construct lunged at her with deadly intent. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, but every alien in the room would remember it for the rest of their lives. Sarah moved like flowing water around the construct's attacks. She struck at joints and weak points with absolute precision. She used one broken piece of the staff to jam the creature's weapon systems, while using the other to destroy its movement controls. The construct, designed to be the ultimate hunter, found itself being hunted by something even more dangerous. When it finally fell, sparking and broken, Sarah stood over it, breathing normally. Her clothes were torn and dirty, but she was not even winded. She looked at the destroyed machines around her like they had been a minor inconvenience. Then she calmly walked back to her seat in the back row. The chamber was absolutely silent. Torres and Voss were staring at her with open mouths. The hegemony delegates looked like they had seen a ghost. Even the apex predators were motionless with shock. Sarah sat down and smoothed her torn shirt. She looked around the room with the same calm expression she had worn all day. "I believe you were asking about our defensive capabilities," she said quietly. Her voice carried clearly through the massive space. "Was there anything else you wanted to know about humans?" The silence in the chamber was complete and terrifying. Hundreds of alien delegates sat frozen in their seats, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Some of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy found themselves unable to form coherent thoughts. Sarah sat quietly in her chair, waiting for someone to speak. Her hands rested on her knees in the same position as before. Her breathing was steady and calm. She looked exactly like she had at the beginning of the hearing, except for the torn clothing and a few small cuts on her arms. Around her, broken pieces of the hunting constructs lay scattered across the floor, like metallic bones. Sparks still flew from damaged circuits. The smell of burned electronics filled the air. Ambassador Torres was the first to find his voice. "Sarah," he whispered, "where did you learn to do that?" Sarah turned to look at him with a small smile. "Basic training was a long time ago," she said simply. "But you never really forget." Dr. Voss was staring at the destroyed machines. "Those constructs were military grade," she said in a shaky voice. "They've killed entire security teams before. How did you know how to fight them?" "I read the specifications when we were preparing for this hearing," Sarah replied. "The hegemony has used them 47 times in the past decade. Their design has 3 critical weaknesses. I memorized them just in case. Just in case, as if she had been planning for exactly this situation. The apex predators in the room were having a very different reaction than the humans. Huntmaster Zektar sat perfectly still, but his yellow eyes were wide with something that looked almost like fear. His pack instincts were finally giving him clear information, and he did not like what they were telling him. For 30 years, he had been the ultimate hunter. His species had conquered 3 sectors by being faster, smarter, and more deadly than anyone else. They were pack hunters who worked together to bring down prey much larger than themselves. They used tools and tactics and never gave up. But watching Sarah fight, Zektar realized something terrifying. Humans were not prey that had learned to fight back. They were pack hunters too. They were tool users too. They were persistent hunters too. But they had evolved on a world so dangerous that they had become better at all of it than his own species. Sarah had not fought like someone defending herself. She had fought like someone who had been hunting things much more dangerous than the constructs for most of her life. Every move had been calculated. Every strike had been planned 3 steps ahead. She had turned the entire chamber into a hunting ground and the constructs into prey. The Vorthak were not the apex predators in this room. They never had been. Shard Queen Valithara was experiencing her own moment of terrible clarity. Her psychic senses had been analyzing Sarah's emotional state during the entire fight. What she found made her crystalline form flicker with patterns of deep unease. Sarah had shown no fear during the battle, no anger, no bloodlust or excitement. She had killed 6 deadly machines with the same emotional state that most people use to solve math problems. Calm focus, practical thinking, a job that needed to be done. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the moment right before Sarah had moved. For just an instant, Valithara had felt something from the human that made her psychic abilities scream warnings. It was not killing intent. Valithara knew what that felt like. It was something colder and more patient. It was the emotional signature of something that knew it was going to win before the fight even started. Something that had been waiting for exactly the right moment to show what it really was. Humans were not just persistence hunters. They were ambush predators too. And Sarah had been sitting in that back row, quiet and patient, waiting for someone to give her an excuse to hunt. The Devourer, called Consume All Things That Grow, was processing data at quantum speeds, and every calculation led to the same impossible conclusion. Its species were the ultimate apex predators in the galaxy. They ate entire worlds. They had never met anything that could challenge them. But humans were something new. They were not just predators. They were adaptable predators. They could change their hunting methods based on whatever they were hunting. They could work alone or in packs. They could use tools or their bare hands. They could be patient for years or strike in an instant. Most terrifying of all, they could choose not to hunt. The Devourer's species hunted because they had to. It was their nature. But humans hunted because they decided to. And if they could decide to hunt, they could also decide to protect. Sarah Chen could have killed everyone in this room if she had wanted to. The constructs had not been a threat to her. They had been an opportunity to show what humans were capable of, while making it look like self-defense. The other delegates were beginning to understand this too. Creatures who had dismissed humans as weak prey were now looking at Sarah with new eyes. Species that had been considering voting against human membership were quietly changing their minds. The hegemony delegates were in complete shock. Their leaders' red eyes had dimmed to almost nothing. The constructs were supposed to have eliminated the human delegation, proving that they were too weak for the Confederation. Instead, they had proven the exact opposite. One of the younger hegemony members made a mistake. It stood up and pointed at Sarah with a shaking appendage. She's dangerous. This proves humans cannot be trusted. They are violent and— Sarah looked at the alien calmly. She did not say anything threatening. She did not move from her chair. She just looked at it. The hegemony member's words died in its throat. Something in Sarah's gaze made it realize that it had just made itself a target of something far more dangerous than anything it had ever encountered. Sarah spoke in the same quiet voice she had used all day. "Humans are only dangerous to things that try to hurt us or our friends," she said. "We prefer peace, but we are very, very good at war." The simple statement sent chills through the entire chamber. It was not a threat. It was just information. But everyone understood the implications. "Perhaps we should continue with the hearing," he suggested. The Confederation's chief administrator, a tall being that looked like a walking tree, stood up slowly. Its voice was like wind through leaves when it spoke. "I believe the demonstration has answered most of our questions about human defensive capabilities," it said carefully. "What about offensive capabilities?" someone called out from the crowd. Sarah smiled again, and once more, every predator in the room felt their instincts scream warnings. "Would you like a demonstration of those too?" she asked politely. The silence that followed was deafening. No one wanted that demonstration. No one wanted to see what Sarah could do when she was not trying to protect people. Dr. Voss finally found her voice. "Perhaps we should focus on our scientific contributions," she suggested quickly. "We have some interesting data about asteroid mining that might be useful." The chief administrator nodded gratefully. "An excellent idea. Please proceed." As the hearing continued, Sarah sat quietly in her back row seat. But everything had changed. The aliens were not looking at her with curiosity anymore. They were looking at her with respect and fear. The apex predators had finally understood what their instincts had been trying to tell them from the beginning. Humans were not prey pretending to be predators. They were not even predators pretending to be prey. Humans were apex predators who had learned to choose restraint. And that choice, rather than making them weaker, had made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Because a predator that chooses not to hunt is infinitely more terrifying than one that has no choice at all. The rest of the hearing proceeded very differently than anyone had expected. Dr. Voss presented her data on asteroid mining, but now the alien delegates listened with intense attention. Before, they had been politely interested in human science. Now, they understood that humans might bring more to the Confederation than anyone had realized. Ambassador Torres talked about human art and culture, but the delegates heard something else beneath his words. They heard about a species that had learned to create beauty while living on a world that constantly tried to kill them. They heard about creatures who could make music and poetry between battles for survival. Every aspect of human civilization took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of what Sarah had revealed. Humans were not just intelligent animals who had learned to build cities. They were apex predators who had chosen to build something better than an empire of fear. The questions from the delegates became more respectful. Instead of asking if humans were strong enough to survive in the galaxy, they started asking how humans had become so effective at survival. Instead of wondering if humans could contribute anything useful, they began asking what humans needed to share their knowledge. But the most important changes were happening among the predator species. Huntmaster Zektar had spent the past hour thinking about everything he knew about pack hunting. His species was good at it, the best in the galaxy, he had always believed. But humans had taken the same basic idea and perfected it in ways the Vorthak had never imagined. They did not just hunt in packs. They hunted in coordinated groups of packs. They shared information across vast distances. They planned hunts that lasted for years. They had turned their entire species into one massive, patient, cooperative hunting party. And then, they had decided to stop hunting and start building instead. During a break in the questioning, Zektar approached Sarah again. This time, He did not come as a curious predator, trying to understand strange prey. He came as one apex hunter, acknowledging another. "Human Sarah," he said, using the formal tone his species reserved for equals. "I wish to speak with you about cooperation between our kinds." Sarah looked up at him with interest. "What kind of cooperation?" "Your species understands pack tactics in ways mine has never achieved," Zektar admitted. "We would be honored to learn from you. In exchange, we offer our knowledge of hunting across different worlds and environments." It was an incredible offer. The Vorthak had never shared their hunting secrets with anyone. But Zektar understood that they were no longer the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. It was better to be junior partners with humans than to be left behind entirely. Shard Queen Velithara approached next. Her crystalline form moved with careful grace as she spoke to Sarah. "Your mental discipline is remarkable," she said. "My psychic abilities could not touch your mind during combat. How do humans develop such focus?" "Practice," Sarah said simply, "and necessity. When you grow up on a world where everything wants to eat you, you learn to keep your mind clear under pressure." "Would your species be willing to teach these techniques to others?" Velithara asked. "There are many young species who struggle with mental discipline. They could benefit greatly from human training methods." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I think that could be arranged. We believe in sharing knowledge that helps people survive." Even the massive devourer approached Sarah, though it had to stay several meters away to avoid accidentally stepping on her. "Small human," it rumbled in its earthquake voice. "Your species confuses my understanding of predator classifications. Are you hunters or builders?" "Both," Sarah replied. "We learned to hunt so we could survive long enough to build. We learned to build so we could stop needing to hunt. Now we can choose which one a situation requires." "This is efficient," it finally decided. "My species has only learned to consume. Perhaps we could learn building from yours." "We'd be happy to teach you," Sarah said. "Building is more fun than it looks." Word of these conversations spread quickly through the chamber. Other species began approaching Sarah and her human colleagues, not to test them or challenge them, but to ask for partnerships. The small, seemingly weak species from Earth was suddenly the most sought-after potential ally in the room. The hegemony delegates watched all of this with growing horror. Their plan to eliminate human membership had not just failed, it had backfired completely. Instead of proving humans were too weak for the Confederation, they had proven humans were too dangerous to leave out of it. When the formal questioning ended, the chief administrator called for the membership vote. In most cases, this was a tense process. Species usually barely scraped together enough votes to qualify. Some failed entirely and had to wait years to try again. The vote on human membership was unanimous. Every single delegate voted yes. Even the hegemony members, faced with the choice between accepting humans as allies or potentially making them enemies, chose the safer option. But the surprises were not over yet. The chief administrator stood up to announce the results. "The Galactic Confederation officially welcomes humanity as our newest member species," it declared. The chamber erupted in applause and various alien sounds of approval. "However," the administrator continued, "there is an additional matter to address. Given the unique capabilities humans have demonstrated today, the Security Council has voted to offer humanity immediate elevated status within the Confederation." This caused a stir throughout the room. Elevated status usually took decades to achieve. It meant humans would have a voice in galactic defense planning and access to advanced technologies. Ambassador Torres looked shocked. "Very generous, but we weren't expecting." "The offer comes with a specific request," the administrator interrupted. "We would like humans to help train and coordinate multi-species security forces. Recent events have shown that our current methods may be inadequate against certain threats." Sarah understood immediately. The galaxy was full of dangerous things, and the Confederation had just realized that humans were much better at dealing with dangerous things than anyone else. "We would be honored to help," Torres said after consulting quietly with Sarah and Dr. Voss. The administrator nodded gratefully. "There is one more matter. The Security Council would like to formally request that Sarah Chen accept the position of Strategic Defense Coordinator for the Confederation." Every eye in the chamber turned to Sarah. She had been quiet for most of the formal proceedings, letting her colleagues handle the diplomacy. This was the galaxy asking her personally to help protect it. Sarah stood up slowly. For the first time all day, she looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention. She was not used to being in the spotlight. "I appreciate the offer," she said in her quiet voice, "but I think you might be misunderstanding something about humans." The chamber waited silently for her to continue. "You saw me fight today and concluded that I'm some kind of super soldier," Sarah continued. "But I'm not special among my species. I had basic military training 20 years ago. I've been working as a diplomat ever since. I'm probably not even in the top 1,000,000 humans when it comes to combat ability." This statement sent a wave of shock through the room. If Sarah was not even remarkable by human standards, what did that say about the rest of her species? "What I am good at," Sarah continued, "is the same thing most humans are good at. Problem solving, adaptation, working with others to achieve goals. The constructs weren't defeated by superior strength or speed. They were defeated by pattern recognition, tactical thinking, and improvisation." She paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. "Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years," she said. "We learned to hunt in packs, not because we were naturally strong, but because we were naturally weak. We learned to use tools because our claws and teeth were pathetic compared to everything else on our planet. We learned to think several moves ahead because the things hunting us were faster and stronger than we were." The chamber was completely silent as Sarah continued. "Most importantly, we learned that the deadliest predator is not the one with the biggest teeth or the sharpest claws. The deadliest predator is the one that doesn't look like a predator at all. The one that sits quietly in the back row and watches. The one that waits for exactly the right moment to act." Sarah smiled, and for the last time every predator in the room felt their instincts recognize something dangerous. "We learned to be the apex predators who choose not to hunt," she concluded. "And now we're offering to help protect the galaxy not because we're the strongest, but because we understand what real strength looks like. It looks like choosing to protect instead of destroy, even when you have the power to do either." She sat back down, and the chamber erupted in the loudest applause of the day. As the formal session ended and delegates began filing out, something remarkable happened. The apex predator species did not leave. Instead, they gathered around Sarah's position in the back row. Zektar and his pack took seats near her. Velathara positioned herself where she could easily communicate with the human. The devourer settled its massive form as close as it could manage. Other predator species followed their lead. For the first time in galactic history, the most dangerous hunters in the galaxy had voluntarily placed themselves in a subordinate position to another species. Not because they had been conquered or threatened, but because they recognized a superior apex predator when they saw one. Sarah looked around at the powerful beings surrounding her and smiled. "I guess we should start planning how to keep the galaxy safe," she said. As the chamber lights dimmed and the last delegates departed, Sarah Chen remained in her back row seat. But she was no longer alone. She was surrounded by the deadliest predators in the galaxy, all of them instinctively positioning themselves as her pack. The quiet human who had sat in the back row and watched was now the acknowledged leader of the greatest hunting party the universe had ever seen. And her first prey would be anyone foolish enough to threaten the peace she had chosen to protect. the galaxy had just become a much safer place, and a much more dangerous one for anyone who made the mistake of threatening it.